Last week I showed you my monthly bullet journal filled with dormice, and this week let's see the same thing in my weeklies. I know it's kind of obscure theme, and I can imagine there's not that many dormouse lovers, but they're so cute and I guarantee that the ones who love them a lot. I've reached out to a few researchers of dormice lately, and every single one of them replied within 24 hours. And not just a word or two, they really took the time to explain everything, and they were so kind. They're not paid to do that, mind you. That's just their goodwill, and I'm always astonished how nice people are. Especially those who love dormice, I guess. But enough about that. Let's jump into our weeklies. By the way, if you're not into dormice, you can use all these designs with any other theme. You don't even need to paint, you can cut out images, you can use stickers, or cutouts, doesn't matter as long as they're roughly the right size. And you just arrange them on the page and use the same font as I did. And you'll have a nice looking bullet journal in your theme. So after sketching, I wrote the titles of the days with a different font in small printed letters and in block capitals with pit brush pens in different shades of autumn colors. I have a few shades of brown and I decided to use them since it fits the theme quite well. And it's autumn after all. If you're not very confident with your lettering yet, go to Pinterest and type in brush pen hand lettering font. You will get a ton of interesting alphabets and fonts that you can copy for your personal use. I found that is the only way I can learn calligraphy. I'm not as meticulous and disciplined as calligraphers normally are, so this approach works best for me. I would not enjoy writing the whole alphabet numerous times, but I can write Monday 4 times no problem. It's basically the same thing, but my brain finds it much more compelling. This has a purpose. I say learn how you learn and use that against your scattered brain, if you have a scattered brain like I do. After the titles, the fun with painting began. The paper in Leuchtturm 1917 bullet journal is pretty thin, but can surprisingly withstand the watercolors pretty well. But nevertheless, with thin paper you should be gentle and the number of layers is pretty limited however you turn it. So when you're painting on this kind of paper, keep that in mind and use one base wash, which is what I was doing first, and then use sticker paint in specific areas on top. Adding fur is no problem, even several layers of fur. But adding shadows proved itself quite challenging on many occasions throughout my weeklies. So my advice would be try to incorporate as many shadows into the first layers as you can, because it's hard to add them later. My paper sometimes peeled and the colors in the next wash didn't want to blend in so nicely, so just keep that in mind. You can still add shadows with the fur texture as well. It just takes way longer. To add the fur texture, I used dry brushing technique, where you have very little paint on the brush and hardly any water. It also helped to push the paintbrush onto the palette a bit to flatten it and spread out the bristles so you get a kind of fan. On a larger painting you could actually use the fan brush, but I haven't seen such a small fan brush that could be used for such a small image. However, a normal brush worked just fine. Make sure to add several coats of fur, each in a slightly different tone that you can of course vary across the animal, since the tail is not the same shade or even the same color as the tummy, for example. Look at your references and find the best match. If it's not quite right, you can always adjust it in the next layer. Don't worry, you can paint many layers of fur. This paint is thicker and doesn't cause that much problem, and the fur is very thin, so it doesn't rip the paper. As far as designs go, I chose circular design for the center image of a sleeping dormouse for the first weekly and added 2 dormice climbing on the trees and flowers in the next, followed by a pair of dormice, a mommy and a youngster on a branch together. And for the last spread, I painted 4 dormice all scattered around the page and dailies around them. I did not film every single brush stroke because you'd probably die of boredom. It's one thing to paint them, but another thing to watch somebody painting every single first stroke. But every painting was done in the same way. A base wash and then just fur texture on top. layers and layers of fur. And here's the final flip through. I really enjoy my little dormice, and I hope I will do another dormouse month in the spring when our project starts, with real European dormouse that we'll be working on. If all goes well, of course. Keep your fingers crossed for the project and subscribe if you want to know how it went. Hope to see you next week with something different. Bye bye!